Ah,
Good
I know we
deal.
say this like every week, but it has been a week. It has been a week.
It is. I mean, it has been a journey to get to today. But man, what a way to, as we're getting close to the end of the week here, jump into this, because I cannot wait to talk about this episode of Andor.
Dude,
And
100% the same.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I can usually sort of gauge. I've been starting to realize that I can gauge how busy my weeks are. Like legitimately, my brain, not just busy like lots of stuff going on, but like busy like as in my brain is like deeply engaged in things in a good way. My gauge for that is, was I able to answer the phone from my comic book store when they called to tell me my pick list is ready, and was I able to make it down there within a day? If I wasn't, I was probably busy. Most days it's like Thursday afternoon, and then usually Friday that I get there. I didn't get there last week, and I haven't been yet this week. So I have 2 weeks of books. I'm like, crap. I think maybe I've been a little too busy.
Dude, man, like that's it. Like that's like where we're at right now.
It is.
Yeah, man, it's like full board. It's rough.
It really is.
What we have that's going on right now.
We do. You know what though? That's why we're here, because this is like this is the way I see it. Like there's Hump Day that everyone's familiar with, of course. But for me, really, it's the Kessel Chat. You said this before too in a different way, but like the Kessel Chat for me is like it's the demark of the week. Like Friday, because we typically do no meeting Fridays or low meeting Fridays.
Love
I guess.
No Meeting Fridays.
And so
love No Meeting Fridays. Recommend it to everybody. I get caught up on so many things on Fridays. I'll usually bounce and go to a coffee shop and like put headphones on and just knock out a whole bunch of stuff where I got no distractions and I just do my thing. But the Kessel Chat is always like that demark. After the show's over, I'm like, all right, I can go to bed and get some sleep tomorrow and like go do some stuff. Yes. Oh no, I completely agree. And I mean, by the way, like I'm never upset. A thing that I feel like, especially we as Americans, we're like always obsessed about like being busy. And in fact, like I've worked really hard to not find different ways to answer that question. When someone says, "Oh, how are things going?" And I know a lot of people will say busy. And by the way, I see that we have people starting to join us here. I'll just call out if I was just asking Jeff if I have audio issues. I've messed with my mic, so feel free to leave a comment. Let us know. I gotta say, like. We have it is one of those things where I hate answering. Oh, I'm busy. I'm so busy right now, because it sounds like everybody says stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But I will say, and I mean this, oh my gosh, we're busy. And so it is like that. And I have to say, like I was so excited to cut out the time to watch this show. And I got an honest question for you, Jeff, because we're going to jump out, obviously, into episode 6 of Andor here. Now, when we have these reviews, when we do these shows where we go through a review, I feel like sometimes it's homework. Like I'm like, oh, I got to watch the show. I got to take a bunch of notes. I got it's a lot. When we were doing Book of Boba Fett, I will tell you that there were some of those episodes where I was like, oof, this is a lot of work.
Same page.
Now, this episode, I started, again, Jeff knows this, I usually will start taking notes and like have some, I put my notebook down because I was like in this episode, like it was like running and running. It was like, I was like at peak tension, suspense. I just could not, I even looked, got the remote going to see how much time was left, because I was like, oh my gosh, how much time do we have left in this episode? It was awesome. I had to rewatch it to come back and take my episode 6 notes.
Yeah, I felt the same way. Matter of fact, your comment about sometimes it feels like a chore. It's not that the show is a chore, because we love it.
No, the show is never a chore.
No,
I think I just said shore.
Oh. What I've noticed is that, and this week it happened to me, as on Wednesday when I went to go watch the show. Sometimes I feel this deep sense of guilt, like, oh, I'm walking away from responsibilities and stuff to go do this. And then like this week I went and watched it. I'm like, no, I've got like an hour and a half. I've got plenty of time before my next commitment. I don't have something that's due right now. I can go watch the episode. And I did. And wow, I walked away like, whoa, like I'm in the middle of this. I'm like, I am so glad I stopped to do this because it took me completely out of my own mind for a bit for some just amazing television. And so when I went back into my next thing, to your point, I don't think I thought about it this way at the moment, but I would not have answered anybody that I'm busy right now. Like someone said, how are you doing? Pretty busy. I would have answered like, I'm doing really good. And I think separately from like a mental health perspective, that's probably something we should all be doing a little bit more of, is like taking that step away for something to get you out of whatever you were in before. So when you come back, your perspective has just changed enough, or your mindset's just changed enough that you're like, oh, I can approach this a little bit differently.
Yeah, and I don't want to and by the way, I can give a whole lot of advice on things like wearing sunscreen, really important. But I will say that taking those breaks is super important, like getting away. And it's also nice. It's also nice when you can shift away from like your wherever you're working, like respecting your zones. And Jeff and I have talked about this in the past, like having zones where it's like, this is the place where I work. This is the place that I sleep. This is the place where I'm creative. Mm-hmm. Having a separation of those zones is really nice because then you kind of respect those areas. It's like a physical way to represent that commitment.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I gotta say, so I got up to watch this in another room. Although obviously I have a television in my office here. It's right there. And I got up to watch this show, and I just couldn't tear myself away. Dinner time came. And I don't hold with a lot of traditions, but I like making sure my whole family's around the dinner table, and that when my wife says, well, come on, everybody, we're going to sit down, because she organizes a lot of our kind of evening routines. I'm always telling the kids, like, hey, we're all going to sit down at the same time. We're all going to spend this time together. And I was like wrapping up on Andor. And I was like, I just need 5 minutes, everybody. Just give me 5 minutes, please. I just can't let Dad break the rules. It was, this episode was so good. And then I was talking to Jeff about this on the pre-show. There's a few things that I can watch anytime it's on. And I've talked about like The Fifth Element, which Jeff, I know that you love The Fifth Element too. The episode of The Prisoner, season 1 of The Mandalorian, which oddly also episode 6. I could watch it anytime that's on. I love that episode. Which is also kind of a heist episode. This episode, episode 6 of Andor, I could sit down and watch this episode. I could watch it right now, and I've already watched it, I think, two, 3 times. This episode was great. If you are a fan of the movie Ronin, if you are a fan of the movie Heat by Michael Mann, which is an amazing movie, which inspired The Dark Knight, the Christopher Nolan Batman movie, you will love this episode of Andor. Yeah.
Totally agree. 100% agree.
Yeah.
All right. Shall we jump into it officially?
Let's do it.
All right.
Punch it.
Oh,
hey.
I transitioned to the wrong one. That's okay.
It's fine. It's okay. I miss not having Karina here.
I know. That was awesome.
Yeah.
She went to, I saw a bunch of pictures and videos from her at New York Comic Con, and she had a blast. She got to meet a whole bunch of cool people and see some great panels. And I'm like, so jealous.
Oh man, that's awesome.
But
Good
dude, we're back. This is awesome. I'm excited because this is, as we were talking about just a minute ago, it was one. It's hard to say that it was one of the best because all of these episodes have been fantastic, but it definitely was one of the best of them. But before we get into Andor, for everyone watching, it would be great if you could do let me see if I got the button here. Do I have it? I do. Okay. Oh, yes, I cut off the bottom though. That's terrible. Anyway, subscribe. We'd love you to subscribe. Matter of fact, if you stay tuned to the end, or I can just tell you now, as I tend to do sometimes when I'm pre-ordering books that are like 9 months in advance before they come out, especially for the High Republic, I forget and I'll end up ordering twice, which happens like 3 times a year. So I ordered 2 copies of this. This is Path of Deceit by Tessa Gratton and Justine Ireland. Justine Ireland was one of the primary authors during the High Republic Phase 1. Tessa Gratton is one of the new authors to be part of Project Luminous to write these books. In the High Republic Phase 2, I should say, in Phase 1, they started. The story picks up about
200 years before Anakin Skywalker is born. Phase 2 jumps back even further, another 150 years. So it takes place even further before the what we call the High Republic, I guess. But in any case, this is the first book in the High Republic Phase 2. It's called Path of Deceit. It's a young adult book, brilliantly written, and it just hurts so good. You get to the end of this book, and the High Republic books have been sort of like a more, like, as far as ending and through lines are concerned, almost like a more tame version of Game of Thrones. Like, there are no darlings in these stories at all, and the people, like, no one's protecting the darlings. The stories go to the conclusion they need to go to, and it's done really well. So I'm showing this to everybody because since I have an extra copy, Ryan and I decided that we're going to give this away. So all we ask is anyone watching live or on Team Replay, if you haven't subscribed yet, just go ahead and subscribe, and we're going to leave this open for about 2 weeks. We'll watch all the subscriptions that come through in the next 2 weeks, and then we'll pick somebody at random, and we will ship you this book. This is actually my other copy is sitting right down here on my comic book box. I just finished reading it, but this is a brand new copy. It hasn't been no highlighters or tabs on the pages or whatever else. So brand new copy of Path of Deceit.
Jeff will sign the book though for you.
I will.
If you if you're interested, Jeff will mark the book up for you.
I will absolutely do that.
We'll mark it with the Kessel chat.
Yes, absolutely. We'll totally do that.
But yeah, that's awesome.
Right on.
So glad that we can do this. The episode 6 though of Andor, I feel like we might want to let everybody know right at the outset. This is going to be a spoiler heavy episode. We are going to be talking about episode 6 of Andor, The Eye. If you have not yet watched it, this is definitely a moment to pause our episode and go and watch not just a great episode of Star Wars, a great television.
Yes.
A great story. It was amazing. Jeff, you know what's a thing that often we don't do? And I was wondering if maybe you might be interested in doing this tonight. Is giving us a brief recap of the run of this episode, because I feel like we need to start there so we can start somewhere. Like there is so much going on in this episode.
There is a ton. It's hard to let me see if this works. There it is. There. The sounds didn't work at first for some reason. Anyway.
By the way, the klaxon alarm that plays in this episode is sped up a bit, and I noticed that. And it's while the yes, exactly. It's this alarm, and it's while the TIE fighter pilots are dropping into the ties, which was so cool.
That was beautiful.
And just and again, I think that we got to start with this episode and the things that happen on it, because it is all slow rolled. This episode, by the way, for anyone that's asking, this episode is 57 or 53 minutes. I think it's 53.
Yeah, it was a pretty long one relative to the length of the other ones.
53 minutes long. The shortest episode of Andor was the second episode, 37 minutes long. I have a theory why that's the case. But 53 minutes long, and do they slow roll everything?
They do.
Jeff, I think it's important though. We should set the stage. How did this episode go?
So we picked up from the last episode where the crew, this haphazard crew of misfits, rapscallions, are ready to pull off their heist. They've gone to a ridgeline above this it's a dam, I believe, above this dam, and it's at night. They're sleeping. They're all going to try to chill and just calm themselves down to get ready for the next day, because the next day is when they're going to take on their heist. And so the crew kind of splits. A bunch of the guys will stay in one place. That Vel and I forget her name go off because they've got a different part to play in a different area they're going to come in from. And then we see down below, and I don't remember a lot of the characters' names, but their partner, who is the Imperial officer, he's setting the stage in his places for wherever the troops are going to be and how they're going to go in a way that isn't suspicious. And then we also know that the Dalny, what is their...
Oh, I had to write this down because I knew this would come up. And by the way, like I too the characters, because there's a bunch of people that are introduced and it's only for this episode and it's just like in and out, and so it's hard to keep up with all the names. The Donnies are the people who are the native people of this planet.
Yes. So then they're all prepping for the Donnies to show up for this annual event. I think it's called the Eye, or they have a term for it, where it's essentially meteors or something that the planet goes through at least once a year, and they skim through the atmosphere, and it creates this beautiful effect in the sky, sort of akin to the aurora borealis, but much more active than that. And so they're all prepping. That's what happened in the last episode. So this episode starts off with, they're ready to go. They're all getting into place. And almost immediately, you get the sense that things aren't going to start working the way they want them to. Almost immediately. A couple of things I noticed right off the bat was Vel and her partner, her romantic and heist partner, are at the far end of the reservoir that the dam is holding back, and they're in a little rock outcropping, hiding, waiting for the moment that they need to get into the water with what we see as like a submersible that pulls you through water. That's a common thing we see in our world. And as they're sitting there, a squad of soldiers, Imperial soldiers, walks up, and one of them is gonna relieve himself, and they're shooting the breeze and having a smart ass conversation. But you can tell by the reaction of Vel and her partner, they were not expecting them to be right there. And it's a little thing. And anybody watching going, oh yeah, of course that's what's going to happen. We'll just hide for a second or two. It's like, yeah, but showrunners and writers don't put things like that in there just for fun. It's not, you don't do it just for funsies. There's a reason for that. And to me, as soon as I saw that, I'm like, oh, this means something. Like that indication right there is, this is telling that more of this is going to happen, and we're likely to see this escalate over the rest of the episode of the show. Because of course, even with Star Wars, Game of Thrones, these things, there are no darlings. Not everyone is going to walk away either alive or unscathed. In parallel to that, time-wise, something really beautiful was happening, in my opinion, which was inside the control room, the commander of the base and a colonel from someplace else is doing an inspection or whatever the person's really doing there. The major is talking it up with him. They're having this, not even a conversation. He's just telling him these things, then hands him a cup after this dialogue. Actually, lack of dialogue, because he does all the talking. Hands him a cup with presumably some sort of alcoholic substance. And they like do kind of a cheers, like as much as the Empire cheers each other. And they turn and they look out the window, and they both stand there in their matching uniforms. Only difference is the tiles and the way they look, but they're matching uniforms, and they both drink their things at the exact same time. And I actually, it was sort of and pour water on your face like I just did. Right? Because the mouthpiece was turned just to the side when I did that. Anyway, I actually wrote on my list of like possible show titles was Empire's True Colors. I actually paused the video right there, and I took a picture of my phone, and I think I posted it on Twitter, and it was basically like that moment right there. That is the Empire. That is everything you need to know about the Empire in that moment. The homogeneity and it's not just homogeneity, it's forceful homogeneity. Those two, for me, I mean, I can keep going with the show flow, but like those two scenes, the first sign that this isn't going to quite go the way they want, and this forceful homogeneity, or homogeneity, however you want to say it, of the Empire, tells you that they don't like being disrupted in any way, shape, or form. And the crew has planned this out really thoroughly. And when you put those sorts of things together with each other, the way that I read that situation, that is, you have this group that doesn't like to flex. They do not like to be flexible for anything at all. And you bring in a highly chaotic situation, you're not going to get a predictable outcome. And so as much planning as this crew can do, those two scenes to me said, if you couldn't assume it already, that those two scenes to me said, you are not going to get a predictable outcome in any way, shape, or form. So just let it all go, because they don't want to be flexible. It's like that immovable object, they're over here and this highly chaotic one, and it's not going to play well with each other. And we see that play out right away. Like we don't have to wait till the very end or near the end when the actual heist is happening. The whole way we start to see little hiccups happening, looks and things of that nature. before I hand it back over to you, I wanted to say, Aussie Star Wars nerd, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. Hello there. I love the intro.
Yeah, no, I loved that scene. That's all of these things are kind of happening at once, because you're getting a little bit more of the politics of the rebels. You're hearing, Nemec is talking about his manifesto. He's talking about his faith, about how he couldn't go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're cutting between that and Cassian tells Nemec, though they don't care about you, that's what's up. Like, they don't even think about you. You're nothing to them. And then you cut to a scene where you're hearing a colonizer talk about how you conquer a population over time. And this is the two members of the Empire standing there talking about how you're basically robbing them of their culture a piece at a time. And I like how they say, pride is their problem, and we're going to use those things against them. There was like this evil bureaucracy of how they were describing a dwindling population that they themselves are killing off. And how they just talk about people like they're just disposable.
That was
and again, they're doing that while they're like kind of, again, I don't know if it's a toast or even thought of it as coffee, that they're just sitting there and it's like talking about how you're disposing of people over a cup of coffee.
Wouldn't it be worse if it was just coffee? Because it makes it almost, this is just a bureaucratic decision about numbers and resources. And that's
it's just the mundane, the mundane bureaucracy of human extinction and or extermination, I should say. And that really hit home. But if I'm right, we leave that scene and we rejoin the rebels from there. And that's, I think, the first time we also hear the phrase Echo One, which I thought was a great callback to Echo Base and Echo One. And you spend all this time with the characters. And so, Jeff, if you want to pick it up from there, I think at that point they go from there to scenes of the administrator and his wife and son, and then the infiltration of everything. Do you want to pick it up from there?
Yeah, absolutely. So they I absolutely love that. He's getting ready with his family. He's the commander is being, and I apologize. I meant to have this text up above here. Let me see if I can make it go away for a second here. There. Yeah, that works.
Oh, nice.
You got a little tighter on there.
By the way, like, I see that we've had a couple more people that have been joining us as we've been talking. We're getting into episode 6, Andor, the Eye. We're at full spoilers. We've just covered that kind of opening scenes. We are now moving right into the next step. So if you haven't seen Andor yet, you really want to pause. If you're on Team Replay, pause the episode now. And come back. But so Jeff, we go in and out of talking to the rebels. Everything's getting ready. You find out things like Tamrin was a stormtrooper.
Mm-hmm.
You're spending all this time learning about the characters, which I am not going to lie. I was like, man, I'm loving this. But that means we're probably going to, like, I love your references to Kill Your Darlings. We're probably going to lose some of these people that I'm really starting to like.
Yeah.
But then we cut back to that same bureaucrat who's the administrator, and he's now with his family. I'm surprised at how much time we are spending with families on in this series. But going ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, that scene really hit me hard because it's not just that it wasn't just that he's spending time with his family. It was the watching of him being very, I don't want to go so far as to say verbally abusive. Although there's a passive aggressive abusive nature to what he was doing with his family.
No, he's being a jerk. He's like, my 12-year-old son can trust himself,
Oh yeah, he's being an asshat. Let's just be fair.
Yeah.
It was interesting though because he clearly doesn't want to be on this place. So he sees what he's doing there as almost a punishment. And I find that interesting because it also builds up to the motivations of the people. You get, not only do you get to the character development of the rebels in their prep for their heist, this character development between this moment that you're referring to, and if we pull back to, I think, the last episode when I don't remember his name, but he's the one who's actually in the Empire still, who's helping them. And when he goes downstairs and he has two of his non-commissioned officers make a comment to him like, hey, the men...
I remembered him because Gorn is a Star Trek reference, which I try to work into every episode.
I remember this, yes. Okay, so Gorn, he two of his NCOs say something to him about it would help the morale of the men if we could do this thing at a different time. And he gives in and gives it to them. And it's interesting to me because we're seeing a lot more of the... I mean, because of the xenophobic nature of the Empire, I think this is a fair statement to make. We're seeing a lot more of the humanity of the people who are in the Imperial military than we ever have before. It's always been, they're stormtroopers. They're nameless faces that just, or faceless names or whatever, that just exist and follow instructions. And even the commanding officers or the officers in the deck area, they're just listening to some commander just give them stuff and tell them to run. But in this series, we're seeing a different side of that. We're seeing these people as actual people with their own ambitions and their own things they want to do, which, funny enough, in a lot of the novels, actually specifically behind me, if I can lean the right way, the Thrawn novels, I have the hardback version of the Ascendancy series, but I have the audiobook version of the one right before that. We see a lot of that in that book series where we get to learn more about the officers and the people and enlisted people who are in the military as real people and their motivations. But we haven't seen that so much in these shows. And Andor, we're actually getting to see that more. And I don't empathize with them. If they're in the Empire, generally speaking, I want to say they suck, but I don't think everyone's bad because you listen to some of these folks. They're just people who are doing a job. And I'm not... when I say that, it's really easy to hear what I just say. Wait, Jeff, you could overlay that on the Nazis too. They were just doing... I know what the word... I recognize how the word sounded the moment they came out of my mouth. But what I mean in this case is it's interesting to see that about these characters because, at least for me, it gives me pause when you're watching the story play out to realize that they're not just automatons or droids that will perform this action because you told them at gunpoint to go do so. They are actually humans. They are actually people with thoughts and feelings and things that they want. They don't just blind like Cybot, I think is his name, or whatever his name is.
Lobot.
Lobot, that is partners with Lando Calrissian, that has the computer basically built onto his head and doesn't speak verbally but communicates with Lando that way. Like, they're not just connected to a computer and do whatever the computer says. They're actually people. And I find that interesting that they made a point of bringing those up in the show so that as the heist is happening, it's not just ordering a bunch of soldiers around who are like, dude, I really don't care. Take their money. It's the Empire. No, they're actually people. Whether or not their motivations are good or not, and we can tell by the commander of that base that they are not good motivations. His wife and kid don't deserve any of this. His wife and kid are just people who happen to be, is married to this person. He's not a good human being. But others are just people. And I find that really interesting because, again, it stitches together the rebellion are just people, and they hate this machine that is the Empire for what the machine has done to them. But then when they have to actually interact with the real individual humans that in many cases make up the Imperial ranks, the experience becomes different. I'm not saying good or bad. It just changes. And you see that in some of their behaviors. Some of them get more intense, like Skeen. Others get a little bit shaky because now they have to interact with a real person. There's an actual human right there. You are pointing this gun out and ordering and yelling around. And so as it progresses to these other scenes where we see the heist progressing, communications relays are down, they get into the base, a gunfight almost happens, and this colonel almost kills the kid, Naveen, or what his name was, until someone comes in and shoots him. The radio operator, all these things start happening at the same time. Like the confluence of like different things happening go from almost like a scattering, like a mind map, and start coming in closer and closer into their orbit. And we start to see them happen in rapid succession. And we see the radio tower finally realize, oh God, I don't have radio signal. Wait, I have this. Hold on, I just tuned into this. And then this is happening here. I like that because you go from it's all well orchestrated until it's not. And what do you do when it's not? And I think that's a good place for me to pause because I don't know, I kind of want to break that down a little bit.
Yeah, no, I loved all of those scenes. For terrible oppressive regimes to take place, it requires collaborators, if that makes sense. It requires It requires it requires people like the administrator. His name is J-Hold, and I don't think it's an accident that he's also kind of a bigger guy, because he's living fat off the Empire, even though it's on a rock that he doesn't like. I kept getting the impression too that there was like a lot of hearkening back to like old Imperial talk, like old like in our history, like what are imperial conquerors like at one point he's talking about his son and he's like, where is his imperial blouse, and I was thinking about how you could go all the way back to Rome and all of these conquering empires, and how they conquer, and one of the things that they need to conquer is the bureaucracy of it all, because it keeps people busy, it keeps people in place, and a lot of people are scared. Nemec is scared the night before all of this, and he's nervous, and he's like, why isn't my faith allowing me to sleep? And I thought all about these scenes because it's a risk to do what the rebels are doing. It's a risk what Mon Mothma is doing, because the safest thing to do is to collaborate. Like J-Hold's wife says, just do what they say. In Motorcycle Diaries, which is about Che Guevara's young life, he basically says, freedom is found with guns. That is how freedom is won. Another revolutionary. I found myself watching this and really enjoying the fact that there aren't stormtroopers. The only people that wear helmets with full masks are the TIE fighter pilots, and everybody else, you see their faces. You hear you know that it's a human that is looking to hold down another set of humans. I loved all of this. By the way, the music of this episode was amazing. I thought it was going to give me a heart attack. As you were describing those scenes, in the background of those scenes, the music is ratcheting up like the whole way, and I found myself even like I loved all of the real human moments. This is like how, again, we've talked about this, Jeff, that series like this work best when you use the time of a long series rather than a 2-hour movie to give time for your characters to just like sit with them. And you see Vel being nervous. You see Nemec being nervous. You see Tamron being agitated. You get all of the tension build up. And then, like what you said, and this is like a trope of heist movies, everything goes right until it doesn't. There's always a blunder or something. And that's what I was waiting for. I was like, when is it going to all go wrong? When is it all going to fall apart? And when the radio guy from the Empire realizes that the comms have been cut, it's at the exact same time that Vel is saying, nobody has to die. Nobody has to die in this. We'll let everybody, or I'm sorry, that's what Cassian says. Nobody has to die. And then Vel says, look, you want to work with us. If we either win or everyone dies. Either we win or we all die. And here you have two sets of extremists, just like what you were talking about with the immovable, the unstoppable force, the immovable object. You have these two diametrically opposed forces, both trying to affect order on the other. This was great. And I'm going to throw it back over to you, because at this point, this is where it all falls apart. And I will say it's also where the lighting for this episode is getting less and less and less. And it feels like it's all closing in around them as things are falling apart. So now they're down in the vault with the administrator. They're going to steal all of this Imperial money from this sector. Jeff, what happens next?
So one thing I really wanted to call out here is that at the moment that that's all happening, the same time and actually before I go into that, Aussie Star Wars Nerd had put up a comment, and I really appreciate this. I agree with you 100% that they're really doing a good job of humanizing the Empire. And I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but the way that I read that and the way that I would think that is, we're not saying that humanizing as in we're making them good. We're simply making them real, like
Making them
humanizing as in
people.
like they're becoming real people to us as humans when we're watching the show. So it's hard when that happens. It is very hard as a human being to not have even some modicum of empathy for that character, because now you've humanized them. There is empathy that will come. It may not be a lot, but empathy will come along with that, and instantly things now feel different. Things now change in every other action that occurs to and from those characters, because now you have a tiny amount of empathy for them. So it's going to feel different than if they were just like, literally the way you just said it, Ryan, is if no one noticed it, there are no stormtroopers here at all.
Yeah.
Like you said, the only ones are the TIE fighters who have helmets. We only see those TIE fighters very, very briefly do we see them with their helmets on. The rest of the show, we see this entire series so far. No, not series. On Donnie, the only people that we see are non-stormtroopers, which I think is great, because you are forced to reckon with the fact that they are all people with thoughts, feelings, and emotions. All of them. You can't put them behind. We're not going to let you forget about them because we put them behind a stormtrooper helmet. Nope. They're people who are really dealing with stuff. So the two things that seemingly happen concurrently are, one, the Dahani's are outside and they're waiting for the event to happen. Well, it's happening onesie, twosie before the big event happens, and they're singing. I don't want to call it chanting. I'm going to say singing because I think it's a little demeaning in this case to call it a chant. It's not that. They are actively singing in multiple layers, various people singing in multiple layers, which I think is very indicative of how this show is playing out and this episode is playing out. They're all singing. Some are singing the same thing repetitively. Others are singing something different. They're coming in at different times, creating this beautiful chorus. There's something I want to call out about that my wife actually noticed before I did, which I really appreciate, is one, we've said this before, and others have said this too, that in the show, if you have closed captioning on, when they're talking, it just says Donnie's speaking their language or something. It does not tell you, it does not translate their words into basic or English. It just says speaking native language or something to that effect. I really, really appreciate that, because it tells you these are real people speaking a language that exists there. This is not something you can just translate into basic English. No, we're not going to just translate this into some basic. This is their own thing. They are a distinct culture that we do not understand and have made decisions about them, basically channeling the Empire here. The Empire has made decisions about them and channeled them or ignored them because they don't understand them and they don't care about them. But if we knew what they said in English, then there could be a conflict and there could be a discussion. But here, there is no room for compromise. There is no room for discussion. The Empire is going to do, as we heard earlier, whatever the hell it wants to these people, and they do not care. The commander, Jehol, actually says so much that we have to go through this again and give up the stinky pelt and blah, blah, like all these terribly demeaning things to these people.
Yes.
But so that's all happening. And if you look at all the people, they're all different. They're young, they're old, they're light skinned, they're dark skinned. They're clearly from a Earth human perspective. There's multiple cultures represented. And I love that because, again, it represents that even in Star Wars, where we so often see that a planet just has a singular culture, like Earth, we don't. We have hundreds and hundreds, and if not thousands of different cultures that make up the entire planet. But in Star Wars, most often what we see, or even probably in Star Trek for that matter, most planets or civilizations we encounter have kind of a unified culture. There are subparts of it that's kind of represented as one people. That's the them, like whatever culture is. This is the Da'anis, like as if they just are everywhere on the entire planet. And I liked that they still, even though doing that here, they still brought in an element of, but the people can be different and look different from one another, even if they are a collective civilization. And you see it in how they physically look in the audience or the group. I love that. And also their singing comes to a crescendo about the time that things are coming to a head in the heist. So all this stuff is going on in the Imperial Vault. They're running people in circles. And I love, they pull out almost the, it's not quite like shaky cam, like Evil Dead style shaky cam. It's not quite that, but it's almost the Michael Bay style where the camera is like near the ground and up at an angle following somebody. So it looks like they're running at an angle and like, which creates a sense of anxiety as everybody's running. Everything is hyper chaotic. They're running everybody ragged. The commander, Joel, I think you said was his name. He's getting more and more haggard. He's sweating profusely.
Yeah, because they're in the vault. And this is when I thought, oh, reminds me of like Heat. Because I think it's Heat where they have the discussion about how heavy money is. That they're like, you guys, you got to remember, like this bag is going to be, is going to weigh this much. So you need to be prepared to transport that much of the weight of the money. And the reason why I was like, oh wow, we're like in full heist at this point, like how heavy this money is, the physical credits that this is. And they're using the soldiers that are in the vault, which by the way, they're all like playing sabacc, which is like, I love how even in the Empire and it's like, the Empire, this is what happens when you conscript your soldiers. Yeah. They don't want to be there. They don't want to die for this stuff. They just want to go back to their regular lives. And so the Empire, they're willing to be like, yeah, man, I don't care. Like, oh, you just want us to work and get this stuff on this ship? Yeah, we'll do that. So they're being run ragged, picking up all the money out of the vault and putting it into the ship that's also co-located in the vault. But I love that you brought this up, because I love how they're using the people there to do that work, because it's that much money. It is this massive vault of money, and they show just how heavy it is, which I thought was such an interesting practical thing. It's not zeros and ones. It's physical credits, which I like.
It's fantastic. No, it's okay. It's fascinating that you bring up that tactile aspect of this, because in Star Wars, it is even in the TV shows and movies, it is extraordinarily rare that we see paper printed things is not normal in Star Wars. Even, and as you said, even credits, Imperial credits, are a piece of metal substance.
It's a little piece of metal. It's a little piece of metal.
And so it's heavy, and like, yes, paper money is heavy as well, but the same amount, I think they said like 80 million credits or something like that. It was some ungodly amount of credits or something.
Yes, 80 million. That's right.
That same amount in paper probably wouldn't be quite as heavy but even still, I mean, it's still a lot of physical stuff. When you see that room that has this very sort of like money loading up the slot machine, also made me think about is the bombers in The Last Jedi. Where they fly over, where it kind of opens up, and then they're just racks that just kind of drop out. It kind of reminded me of that, where if you open up these straps, they would just kind of slide off and roll on the floor and be, create a mess. But they run them ragged to get this stuff onto this particular ship that they can get out of there with, and instantly things just start going very poorly. Just immediately start going. I will say the only part of their plan that goes basically according to plan is Vel's partner is up in the main room with the wife and the son and the two control operators that were in that room, and they're at a table. I love the symbolism of the four of them, the wife and the son sitting in the middle, the two operators sitting on the sides, bound and gagged. I don't like that, obviously, but I like this comparison of the Force 4 people in this very restrained scenario, physically restrained, and this beautifully set table waiting. Well, beautifully as in like it's well appointed for the Empire, set out ready for them to have dinner, but no one's going to get to have dinner, and she's just kind of walking around making sure things happen, because when the whole thing ends, you don't see what happens to the four of them. She just leaves the room, but you don't even see that. You just see her kind of like walking to a corner, and then the next scene, she's walking outside. And that's it. It's like the only part of this plan that actually went the way that it was supposed to go is she just kind of walked away. And that was it. I'm like, that was fascinating to me. But like this chaos, I don't even remember half of it that happens in there. Guns start going off. Somebody has a heart attack. Like all of this stuff just starts happening like in rapid succession.
It's like tropes of it's like Dog Day Afternoon or other bank heists. There are all these tropes of a bank heist when it goes badly. And one of them is, by the way, there's a theme of betrayers in this episode.
Yes.
And what it is to be a betrayer. Gorn is a betrayer to the Empire, and the one guy, the J-hold, the commandant of this place, who's down there, he's a big guy, and they're making him lift all this gold. Let's just call it what it's intended to be. It's all this gold,
the gold bars,
and,
or raiding Fort Knox, or whatever.
Exactly, yeah. And so they're just like, loading it all in there, and then he sees Lieutenant Gorn come down. And Lieutenant Gorn, the guy is like, the commandant is like, "Oh, you're gonna hang for this," which I thought is such an old timey way to say that.
Yeah,
like the Empire has gallows apparently, and
I'm gonna swing a rope over a tree and get you on a horse.
Yeah. I just thought, like, what an old West type of thing this is right now. Like, we're gonna hang
for this.
And I just thought, and Lieutenant Gorn says, this is Lieutenant Gorn. See, and this is where there are tropes, and I've talked about this a lot. There are tropes in certain styles of movies. There's tropes in spy thrillers, the secondhand shot. There are tropes in bank heists. One of them, by the way, is you have to go to an underground doctor because something went wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And that also happens in this episode. But another one is the collaborator on the inside has to pay the ultimate price. And that's because they've been collaborating. They've been helping the system that they hate. And Lieutenant Gorn says, essentially I should be hanged for serving you for 7 years.
Yeah. I really love that he said that. I love that they didn't make him tragic. I love that they didn't take that. They didn't turn that into a, like, "Oh, I'm not the one who's going to hang. You're going to hang." Or like, they didn't do something like that and then he dies and you're like, "Oh, it's a tragedy that he dies." Like, no, he actively says, he's like, "I fully am aware of the situation that I am in. Like, I am doing this totally intentionally, and I know what I have done.
I just want to hurt the Empire. Yeah, I don't care what happens to me. I just want to hurt the Empire."
Yeah, I so appreciated that from his character.
I liked that. I liked that because it and by the way, there was another trope that they broke, which is there should always be a rule of two, which is Cinta is upstairs by herself with, Cinta, as you said, the wife and the son and the two other people, and typically that means that Cinta doesn't make it out, and Cinta does make it out, so we know that happens. By the way, there's a thing, handprint identification, to get into the vault, and it is almost a shot for shot use of the Spaceballs handprint identification, which I thought was hilarious because that's not in Star Wars handprint identification, and I love that it looks very much like Spaceballs. Just like it took me a while to realize that Nemec's little navigator thing, that's a Polaroid camera. And it took me a while to realize, dude, that's a Polaroid camera. He keeps opening up the top the top thing. I loved that.
You know what? It's funny you say, because he makes a comment in like one of the previous episodes that when everything else fails, this thing is still going to work.
This thing's still going to work. Yeah, exactly. Right?
I never even got that. That's awesome.
Polaroid camera is going to work. But yeah, so they're in the vault. The army crew, that's the firing crew, the infantry crew that's up on the surface, is running now down to the vault. It's all dark. They've got most of the ship loaded. All of your principals are down there at this point. Cass is in the pilot seat and he's like, we gotta go. So he's the getaway driver. Again, we're in a bank heist at this point. And this is where it all needs to fall apart, which is exactly where it does, which is the one of the soldiers from the surface sees Lieutenant Gorn and says, "Hey, what's happening here?" He doesn't know Lieutenant Gorn's a turncoat. He doesn't know he's collaborating with the rebels. And he's trying to get them to leave. And I'm going to throw it over to you because this is where all of the planning, everything falls apart.
I love that. When he asks him, "Sir, is everything okay?" And he's like, everything's fine. It's okay. The guy just keeps looking like, are you sure? Okay, you can go rejoin your men. You can go join your men. And I don't remember the rest of the dialogue there, but it is very clear that the person he is giving that command to does not either believe him or is highly suspicious of what he just
he's
said.
Highly suspicious. Yeah, he's highly suspicious because Lieutenant Gorn is, and by the way, like, I often think, what would I do in situations like that? I know that sounds silly. This is the same thing that happens. Like if I'm watching The Abyss, I try. Can I hold my breath for as long as Ed Harris swims? So I was sitting there thinking, what would I say to these soldiers if I was Lieutenant Gorn? And my first thought was, oh, I'd say this is a super classified thing and they need to leave right now. And so that's exactly what he says. And then he looks at the commandant and he says, tell them that they need to leave because this is super.
Oh, sorry,
classified.
I was thinking of a different scene. Yeah, yes, when they're inside and he's telling this commandant, tell him this, and the commandant. That's when the commandant starts having his heart attack, right?
Yes, because they've been running him ragged, moving all that
Yes.
gold, and so then the commandant, like he's like. He grabs his arm or something, and then he kind of keels over, and dead silence. All the guns come out at once.
Yep.
I mean, all of the guns.
The
come
clickety
out at
clack
once.
sounds you hear of the typical
Exactly.
like, as if somehow all guns make like a bunch of clacking sounds when you lift them up. I don't know.
Oh,
Didn't know that was a real thing, but like it's the typical sound of
Yeah.
or whatever those noises are.
A lot of click sounds in those laser pistols because
Yeah,
my gosh, like yeah, it's like you can hear it all. Everybody's like ready, and there's not even a time to yell. Wait.
Right.
Everybody just starts shooting. And I'm sorry. I'll refrain.
No,
Please take it from
you're totally right. I love how that played out because it takes the chaotic nature of what just happened that was still almost kind of a controlled chaos to no, there's no control anymore. Just get it going. Just get from here to there as fast as you can. And of course, everything starts falling apart immediately. Like people start getting hurt. People are either shot. And they finally get onto this. They finally do get onto the ship. Cassian is not unscathed. Like he's kind of gone unscathed most of the actual heist. Like he's not super involved in a lot of what was going on. He has a part, but he's not. He's just playing his part. It's kind of just going without him until that one officer was hiding under their stairs, and Cassian ran up, and the guy followed him on and attacked him and starts choking him. And he only is saved by Nemec, who just happens to take a shot and catches the guy and gets him, and he lives. But it goes for a bit there, and you're like, Cassian kind of let his guard down to get this thing done because everything is happening so quickly. Like basically from the beginning of the heist or a few minutes in, you're just on the edge of your seat. And even through the moment that they fire up the engines on that ship and they take off and they get out and they fly up into space, or up into the atmosphere and they start flying, you get a reprieve for like 30 seconds before you hear the TIE fighter sound come into picture, and it goes right back into being chaotic again. Because of course, as soon as they take off super fast, all this equipment falls. Nemec is hurt really bad because they're not holding on tightly enough, and a pallet of these gold bars, essentially, which is what their metaphors for or analogies for, is like pile in and crushes him and breaks his back. Essentially, that's what they're implying, is that his back is now broken, and they bring him up, and he's still got to help them navigate through this chaotic asteroid storm that's happening.
And by no means the metaphor wasn't lost that he is crushed literally by like he talks the entire time about the oppression of the Empire. He is crushed by the weight of its riches. I like that. I do not think that is we were just talking about how there are choices that you make as a filmmaker and a writer, and that was like one where it was like a blunt, I'm hammering this point home, that our purest of our revolutionary, the youngest of the bunch, the one who's writing a manifesto that is that talks about the rebellion as a faith, he is crushed by the weight of the Empire, and that is, I mean that right there is everything. And of course, I hate to say this, that has to happen. This is an episode where even at the outset, I had a numbers game on who wasn't going to make it, and I have to say, Nemec, that dude was at the top of my list.
Yeah.
He
that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody.
Poet.
Like I was at the top of my list. So like he's too young and he's too youthful. I shouldn't say young. He's too youthful in his beliefs and his view of the world.
that
he's the idealist.
He is.
And Andor is none of the things that this kid is, but this kid is the thing that he's the inspiration.
Yes.
You know, you've got your other parts of the team that are all implementation. All they're doing is there to do the work. But Nemec is inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
He's there because of a larger idea. It's not revenge, and it's not a fight or anything else. He's there because he believes in the cause. And so you have to have someone like him fall, so that way someone can take on his cause. But I'm sorry, going ahead.
No, you're right. And if they didn't, I think it's one of those, maybe a trope. I think it's in many cases a necessary one. I'm sure there's other ways to write around it, but it's almost a necessary one, because if he didn't fall, if he survived, in any way, then who is going to pick up the mantle and take this forward? Because yes, it would have been great. Cassian still wants to leave. That all of that would have played out. The money gets to Luthen. All of that stuff that's being implied happens. But the problem is, if he survives, then he's still sort of the idealist that no one's really listened to because he's young and whatever else, and nothing happened to reinforce what he's saying. And so everyone kind of walks away and does their own thing. Yet by him falling, it's never a fun thing to watch, but by him not making it through, it reinforces for everybody that, what did we just do this for? And you have to the characters have to ask themselves those questions, like, why did I just do this? For some of them, it's an easy answer. Skeen makes it very clear once they get to the planet where they're trying to save Nemec's life. Skeen makes it very clear what he's in it for.
Yeah.
He tries to convince Cassian of that. Like, that's kind of the next major jump here, is that he tries to convince Cassian that they should just split the money and kill everybody and say, peace, let's go. And I really, in that moment, we get to see a bit more about who Cassian is. I will not go so far as to say he is the good guy. This actually came up as our one of our viewers said earlier, it came up in the live stream. I don't like the idea that there are good guys and bad guys. Nobody is just good or just bad, and that's it. That's too binary, and it's not interesting.
I will say I am a believer in there are good people that do bad things, and there are bad people that do bad things, and there are good people that, it's like, I think that the
I agree.
There is that people should be judged by their choices, and I really do think you can make the wrong decision. And
I'm with you. I agree with you. And that's actually why I like, so when I say the phrase, like, the bad guy and the good guy, that's why the reason I don't like those is because what you said, good people that can do good things and good people that can do bad things, and vice versa. It's not binary. It's not this or this and that, because no character would be interesting if they're good and they don't do anything but good things, and that's it. Right. Like, that's a completely one-dimensional character, just like the bad that just does bad for bad, and that's it. Like, okay, well, there's nothing redeeming there, so there's no evolution of this story. Okay, well, there is no story then, because that character can't evolve and change in any way. They can't be modified if they're just bad or just good. And so when there's a rhythm that can exist in how those things play on a spectrum, regardless of where they come from, that makes it an interesting character to watch, because you can resonate with that. You can accept that, like, I can see myself in some of these things. And so the way Cassian responds, or rather kind of doesn't respond to Skeen, and how he's listening to him and kind of asks the questions back to him in those sorts of ways. Skeen even says, don't get all high-minded with me. I love that interaction, because in the moment, someone asked me earlier today, were you surprised by Cassian shooting Skeen? And my response was, surprised? Sure. Was it unexpected? No. Like, I was fully expecting that something like that was going to happen. Was I surprised it happened in the way that it did? Yes. But I was very much expecting that as soon as that encounter started, I'm like, he's going to start asking him, oh, there it goes. Yep, he did that. I was expecting actually Vel to walk out at that moment and catch three of them, which would have caused a reaction or an argument, and then Cassian would have shot him. That's actually more of what I was expecting. But I kind of like what they did here better.
Well, I prefer this. This so much. Don't mean to interrupt. Keep going. You like it because...
Oh, I like it because it when he goes in to confront Vel, it gives Vel's character sort of an out
from the situation of having to deal with that. So she gets to continue to hold on to, I'm dealing with Nemec. I've got this thing. I'm holding to the thing I was trying to get done. She doesn't have to also then confront somebody within her midst that actually did want to rob her. It's not Cassian. It was actually the person, one of the people you thought you were going to trust, which makes her her character. I think we've seen with her character that she puts up a really good front. And I'm not saying that she's not a strong character or a strong-willed person at all. I think she puts up a really good front. Not quite as good as Cinta, but a really good front. But she's still got some things to learn to back up that front with real muster afterwards. Whereas Cinta, I think, is actually a little bit more rigid and hard and can deal with that stuff a little bit better and can like hold her line, or hold the line. But I think in that situation, if she had to confront Skeen and all that, it would have been very difficult for her for just a little too long to make the right call. And then Cassian would have had to end up shooting him anyway. But then it would have created this weird dynamic between her and Cassian, and that could have worked. But I actually liked this because it gave us back to Cassian. We're developing Cassian's story. We get to see how Cassian dealt with the situation.
It was called Andor. Yes,
that's it was called Andor. And then when Vel comes back into it, it's all on Cassian. Like there's nothing for her to deal with other than Cassian just did this. It's all on him. And we don't have to deal with those two characters can still stay the characters they already are.
Yeah, and she even says something like, I don't believe that, and I think she says, you'll have to think about that then.
Yes, I love that. I love that line.
Because it's like how it's one of those like, how well did you know your husband moments,
Mm-hmm.
And the which by the I think that's from, I think, a short story, Button, and but the thing that I like, so they escape. By the way, I loved the visuals of the eye. I'm gonna say something that's kind of, I mean this. I don't typically find myself getting too emotional when I watch, and I don't mean this in some like macho way. I mean, it's like there's things that really like pull me in, and I appreciate when that happens. I remember when Rey pulls the lightsaber in the snow, and I remember thinking like that scene really stuck with me in The Force Awakens. That scene has always stuck with me. When Darth Vader tells Luke, "You were right." When, and I should say it was Anakin Skywalker at that point, says, "You were right. You were right about me. Tell your sister you were right." That scene always sticks with me. That's great acting, by the way, by Sebastian Shaw. The scene where they're on the ship trying to escape, and Nemec yells "climb." It is such a great moment, and it's such a call for Cassian. It's a clarion call for Cassian. It's a moment for Cassian, for him to know this is the thing. He needs to rise above this. And at that moment, they're actually surrounded. The lights of the eye have changed. They've gone from greenish blue to red, and it looks like they're coming out of the fire to be reborn. And I thought of the rebel symbol as like a phoenix, and I loved that. I loved all of the sequences of that. And so now you have a somewhat remade Cassian, to the point where when they're on the ship, and in a Ronin-like way, it's like, what are you going to do with your injured person? And Vel just wants to abandon them. He's dead already. We can't help him. And it's Cassian and Skeen who say, no, we should take him to a doctor. Skeen, even at this point, is respectable, even though I knew you couldn't trust him because I didn't like his character on Girls. And so they go to the doctor, the underground doctor. It could have been a vet. And that's like such a trope of like a heist gone wrong. You got to go to some country doctor and everything. And I saw that too, Aussie Star Wars nerd. I saw that too, that the last words that K2SO says is "climb." And I felt that. Like, that's what I mean. Like, that meant, I don't know what it was, but to hear the actor yelling climb, I did think of K2SO when he's yelling the same thing when they're on Scarif and they need to get up. That I loved that moment because that is, by the way, that's like a literary item, is the reference to climb, rise. Christopher Nolan uses it in Rise of the Dark Knight, I will say, by the way. What are they chanting? They're chanting rise. That this is a by the way, used by Adrian in the Rocky movie Get Up. Used by Trinity to Neo in The Matrix. Get Up. Rise is a clarion call for the hero to become something different. And in that moment, Cassian does, and he even says, "No, we're going to go and take Nemec to the doctor." And they're on that planet, and Cassian is changed now. And you know, Skeen, you learn finally Skeen is in fact in for himself, and he's like, "Hey, we can just split the 80 million, 40 for you, 40 for me. We go our separate ways. I'll forget you, you forget me. There's this planet." He tells him the whole plan. Now, the problem with someone making a deal with you like that, because now we're back in Old West times, because they're even outside of a barn. That's what I mean. Like, it's like the country doctor they're at, trying to see if Nemec can survive. And they even says, Cassian even says, maybe he'll get lucky. In that moment, I remember thinking of the movie Unforgiven. I thought of Ronin. I thought of how characters like Robert De Niro's character in Ronin, or Al Pacino's character in Heat. This is the Heat moment of this show. They don't trust in luck. Clint Eastwood's William Money character in Unforgiven doesn't trust in luck. In fact, William Money says he's only ever been lucky with shooting. And when you get a plan like what Skeen says to Cassian, and even I'm sitting there realizing this too, there's only two ways you answer that. You either agree completely with the plan, or you have to kill Skeen. There's no other way around it. Yeah. You can't say, "Nah, man, let's not do that. You're right, let's not do that." No, he just said, "Let's leave him here." He doesn't say, "Let's kill him." He just says, "Let's leave him here and take the money. This is a great opportunity for us." And that's where you get all of this episode has all these layers of betrayals, like betrayal. And now we're at our lowest level of betrayal. Skeen wants to leave behind the wounded Nemec and Vel. He wants to leave behind the ideals of the rebellion. And this is the last honor that Cassian himself can't abandon, because what that would mean is he'd have to, this is like the decision point. He's either going to be in it for himself, or he's going to be in it for something else. And if he's in it, and again, you can't say no to an offer like that. It's like Game of Thrones. You either win or you're dead. And so he has to, right when Skeen starts talking, and I thought that story about his brother in the orchard made no sense at all. And I knew, oh, he's got to kill Skeen now. And in Old West, in Robert De Niro in Ronin, in Al Pacino against Robert De Niro in Heat, he has to kill him. And by the way, spoilers for Heat. I apologize because it's probably one of the greatest movies ever made. But when he goes back in and he says to Vel, "Yeah, I had, I killed Skeen," and he was going to take the money and run. And she says, "Yeah, I don't believe you." And he says, "Well, you got something to think about." I thought, damn, this is hardcore. And he's only taking what's owed to him. He's an honorable thief. And I love how even what's his face calls him the thief Andor. Luthien, he calls him the thief Andor. And in this moment we get that the choices, again, I'm not judging people on good guys or bad guys. I always judge in my real life and in fiction and all this other analysis. I judge people by their deeds. And this is where you get Nemec has died. Here is his manifesto. He wanted you to have it. And in this moment where that's a huge risk for Cassian to walk across that room, and you notice how slowly he does it.
Mm-hmm.
He reaches over and quickly grabs the book. And he's now the carrier of the ideals.
Yeah.
I love this. I keep saying that, and I'm sorry because that's not deep criticism, but it's he does even says he rejects the path. What does she say? She says this is his. He wanted you to have it. He says I don't want it, and she says he insisted. It's his torch to carry now, and so yeah, I then love that because then the scene cuts with him leaving, and then Jeff, I'm sure you have thoughts on all this, and then they cut to Coruscant from there. Jeff, I'd love to hear your thoughts on all this, and then to Coruscant, and I know we're going over. We're almost at the end of this episode.
I'm just gonna go to Coruscant because the handing over before you're right, the handing over of that manifesto. My first thought on Cassian saying I don't want that was Cassian's his nature to tend to want to just say no first, like reactionary, like to anything, just like no. And then when she says he insisted, and she says it with a very calm demeanor, it does make him take pause. He does stop and think for a moment. And yeah, I'm with you. I was very apprehensive in that moment when he's reaching out slowly to grab the book. I thought, are they going to do something else? There's going to be a gun pulled. But
there's going to be some type of standoff.
Something. But I actually liked that it wasn't that because
I did too.
There was a very Lord of the Rings sort of moment there where the one thing handing to the other thing, like something about that changing hands, I found very, very interesting about that moment. But yeah, then moving.
It's the letter from Saving Private Ryan. It is the goodness in the universe. You know what I mean? And Saving Private Ryan is a letter to his father. You gotta bring this letter back. You gotta get this letter back. It's to my dad, but it's got my blood on it. It's a sacred thing at this point. It's Nemec's sacred thing, and it's now in Cassian's hand.
So then we jump to Coruscant, and Luthen is talking to a prospective client about some things, and she's like, "But it has writing on it." He goes, "It can mean whatever you want it to mean." Like just. Again, very flippant. And there's another customer, maybe her partner or just another customer, sitting in the front sort of lounge area, and he makes a comment, and it's a comment that at the moment you're led to believe because it's a comment from off screen that somebody has just caught Luthen. Someone has just
that's what I thought.
That's exactly, and I know like that's exactly what they meant. And then when he pauses and goes like what, and then that response. Then you look over, oh, well, it's on. The guy's like, whatever, man. It's just kind of on the news. And then Luthen looks at his partner to her. Well, I'll go look in the back. I was just kidding. And he walks in the back, and you see him sort of like, like it's almost like he just did a little bit of a drug, basically. Like he has this instant, or he breathed in some helium, and like instantly he's just bubbly for a moment or two. Like this moment of levity. In all of this, at holy ish, this actually worked. Like,
yes.
Well, so far as he knows, like he, we'll still have to see the money get to him, or wherever, but still that it actually worked. And I love that we're getting to see more of that shop. I was thinking the other day that it's sort of it's clearly a front, but it's a front where it's a mask he has to wear and has to really wear it well often, but he's not comfortable in it, which makes it even harder to do. And so watching it again, like coming back to that shop as a place we have to see him put that mask on, it does make me think, kind of thinking forward in this series, especially the first season, are we going to get to a point in the first season? I think it'd be interesting where we start to see fissures and cracks in Luthen being able to wear that mask of the persona of that person who runs that shop and what that world looks like. How is he going to deal with it over the next X number of episodes? I'm very curious to see what they show us of that, because I think that would be really interesting to watch it as he gets more and more of the resources he needs and has to put more time and energy into the rebellion. how is that going to affect the front that he's putting on over here and playing this other personality? And clearly from his ship in one of the earlier episodes, when the thing pulled down and he started changing, he's got multiple of these personas that he puts on a regular basis. He's prepared for it. This is just one of many.
Yes.
I'm very curious to see where and when we start to see cracks and fissures, because I don't think he's going to go that persona can go unscathed. I don't think it can last much longer.
No, and we also have a scene of Mon Mothma inside of the Senate, which I really like. And
yes,
I love how the Senate's empty. And it's, by the way, like if anybody goes to the U.S. Congress, like, but that's how the U.S. Congress is. Like if you go to the Senate or sit in the House of Representatives, they very rarely are all in there together. They just go in there and privately. They go in there they go in there when they have to talk. And then they to get on the record, and then that's it. Like a lot of committees, you'll see all of them there, and even then during the committees, I've been to Washington D.C. Quite a few times. I always love to go to the gallery and sit in the Senate or the House of Representatives, and I'm never not surprised at how empty it is in there, because they rarely debate big things together. They just show up and talk and do their part and then walk out. I watched Senator Merkley from Oregon give this impassioned speech on climate change to an empty Senate, but he gave it. And I remember thinking that when I was watching Mon Mothma talking about a fact-finding mission, which, by the way, I thought was a very nice callback to episode 1. A fact-finding mission that has to be looked at for the Gormans, because the Gormans have it's been a boot. The Empire has been on a boot to the throat of the Gormans with their trade, and this is just terrible what we've done. And then there's no one there in the Senate. There's no one in the I guess now the Emperor, but what was formerly the Supreme Chancellor's lectern. Nobody's there. And she's then looking around because people are also getting distracted, and that's when she notices. And I think that's when we cut to the scene in Luthien's shop. But I loved all that. There was one thing, and I'm going to put my little tinfoil hat on. There was one thing that I noticed, and I went back to see if I was right about this, is that when they cut to the shop, the woman who's buying the things is saying to the shopkeeper, who's Luthien's assistant and also helping with the rebellion, she says, oh, and by the way, I'm also skipping past where the ISB has been activated, because this is essentially like a massive terrorist event for the Empire, and now they're locking down everybody. Deirdre's involved. Everybody's involved. No, and he even says, "Don't get comfortable. This is not a meeting." I thought about how. Yeah, I thought about how the bureaucracy of it all, that everybody, there's another meeting. I guess we got to show up. I'm going to bring my coffee. Don't get comfortable. This is not a meeting. I want to have all your guys' plans. But here's my tinfoil hat thing. The shopkeeper says, "Oh, this thing that you love, it's Devron blue." And I was like, Devron blue? Like, what's Devron? Why do I know that? It's Devron system, I think, is where Cloud City is where Bespin is.
Oh,
I think that's where the Millennium Falcon, like, he's looking through his nav computer, Han Solo, and he's like, where do I look for it? The Devron system. What's in the Devron system? Lando. Oh, Lando system? No, Lando's not a system. He's a man. And the blue. And I thought about how the shopkeeper's wearing blue, Luthien's wearing blue, and for the first time, Mon Mothma's wearing blue. Her space Buick is blue, and I thought, the Kyber crystal chain that Luthien gives Cassian is blue.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, I'm gonna go back and look at everybody's costumes in this episode. And if you go back, you'll notice that Cassian and a lot of the others, they all have these little Cassian, Tamarin, they have blue under their clothing. That the rebellion is concealed. Nemik is wearing red because he's the sacrifice. He's got this big red hat on at the start. Tamrin's has blue. You can go back into other. They're all wearing blues or bluish grays. Cassian's wearing a bluish gray shirt at the end, and again, he's got the big blue chain that he takes off and hands to Vel. Then the only person that isn't wearing blue that's working with the rebellion is, of course, other than Lieutenant Gorn, who is a member of the Empire, is Skeen, and he's wearing a yellow hat. And he's wearing and he's got black and red on his. Everybody that wears red in this episode does not make it out. I again, it was my tinfoil hat, but I'm a big believer in cinematography and the use of colors to tell stories. I don't think it's an accident that in that scene when the eye starts, it's all blue. And then it turns to red as Nemec is dying and as they're trying to take off, and he's got to rise, and again the whole phoenix imagery. But I don't think it is an accident that this blue color is permeating, and I think that there might be a hidden color story to this show that I am just maybe now just starting to chip away at, because I remember in episode 1 the uses of yellows and green, and even the people that they're gassed and so their skin's all yellow that they find from the ships. The greens, the dark green colors that everybody's wearing on the planet, where like Bix is and everybody else, and all of these the colors of all the gloves that are on the walls. I think there is a secret color story that is being told in this show, and I think blue is a very important color, and I will be watching to see how that plays out next week too.
I'm excited to see it too. That'll be awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are going to wrap up. This has been fantastic. Like, this episode was seriously just amazing. We went a half hour longer than we usually go.
Went a half hour. It's a 90-minute episode tonight. Oh my gosh.
Because there was just so much to talk about. And for everyone who's still watching live, we so appreciate you sticking with us, because
thank you.
This was just fantastic stuff. And just a reminder before we wrap, if you didn't see the Chiron earlier, all you have to do is subscribe in the next 2 weeks, and we're going to be giving away this book, Path of Deceit, brand new copy, first book in the High Republic Phase 2, and we'll send it out to you. So just on YouTube, hit the little subscribe button. That's all we ask you to do, and then we'll pick a random winner in a couple weeks, and that's it. So on that note, I think we are going to call it a night. Ryan, this has been fantastic.
It's been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this.
Everyone, thank you so much for seeing us. Everyone on Team Replay, thank you for being here. We appreciate you too. Have a great one. We'll see you next week.
Hey, bye, everybody.
Cheers.